There's no mistake, is there? Death has left its mark once again. I'm sorry, I cannot give you your proper rights, but at least you did not join those who live in death. Your soul will return to the Erd Tree in time. Honeyed rays of gold, deliver this spirit. Ah, a tarnished, are you? I'm known as D. I hunt down those who live in death and weed their death root. Heed my warning. The village here has been touched by death, and worse yet, it is home to a mariner. If you value your life, then go no further.
And now, our feature presentation.
So welcome back to Honored Madman for another drop in the Elden Ring bucket. Today we're going to be talking about a character or characters that I honestly didn't think were going to be that divisive, but I honestly should have. I'm of course referring to the brothers D, the Undead Hunters, that shared a set of twinned armor. So in today's video we're going to try to go over just who they were, why they were, how they were, and just try to better understand these characters, as we often do here on Honored Madman. But before we get into all of that, let's have our intro, because this is going to be, well, it could be a long video, it could be a short video, but let's have our intro anyway. So yesterday I talked a little bit about Geraint, the beast clergyman and leader / founder of the Order of Undead Hunters, a group of rather fanatical fundamentalists of the Golden Order that hunt down and stamp out any traces of the undead all across the lands between, or as I like to call them, Geraint's cleanup crew, basically the extremely well-funded janitors of Elden Ring. As we all know, Beast Clergyman Geraint was actually the alias of the Black Blade himself, Malekith, America's own quote-unquote half-brother. He was originally charged with guarding the Rune of Death, but Ranni, with the help of Rykard and some Newman women, managed to steal a fraction of the rune from him, which of course resulted in the deaths of many demigods, including America's favorite, Godwyn the Golden. Now, because of the nature of Godwyn's death, he was killed in spirit but not body. That left him as a mindless undead corpse that was sort of forever slumbering in this altered state of being. And since somebody had the bright idea of laying him to rest at the roots of the Great Tree, he began to spread his virus all across the lands between, resulting in the dead rising from their crypts and graves as mindless undead and infecting the very roots themselves with Death Root. Godwyn himself started mutating into some basilisk-type sea monster, with his burial shroud even turning into some sort of scales. The Death Root even has this weird effect on crabs where if they eat some of it, they start altering and their backs start showing a visage of Godwyn, or at least his mutated-ass face. A great example of this face can be found deep underneath Stormvale, where you can witness firsthand just how infected the roots of the Great Tree are. It's also interesting to note that there's some skeletons that happen to be in boats down here. I wonder if they're the source for the mariners, but I'm getting off topic. Fun headcanon though. Anyway, as we all know, Malekith was punished for this theft and charged with making the Rune of Death whole again via eating Death Root. This was a task he would never be able to accomplish by himself, so he formed the Order of Undead Hunters. The Undead Hunters travel across the lands between in search of the Mark of the Centipede, which to them is evidence that those who live within death are nearby. This also leads to them carrying around dried up centipedes and dipping them in gold, presumably, to keep as trinkets. The funniest part is that the main reason behind them fetishizing centipedes is simply due to the similarity in appearance to the curse mark of death. I'm sure there's probably more to it than that, but I mean, maybe the centipedes aren't dipped in gold and they just are gold and they're centipedes that fed on Godwyn, the Golden. Which could in fact make these centipedes one of the many spreaders of Godwyn's virus, right up there with basilisks, crabs, and that one omen by the minor Erd Tree, who himself has a group of disciples. And this brings us to the subject of today's video, the Brothers D. Apologies for the over-the-top preamble. So I used to think one of these two was a mimic tier of the other, or maybe even night folk or Nox, but it's said that the Golden Order didn't revile them as accursed beings, and I'm almost certain that the Golden Order reviled mimic tears and night folk, the Nox especially, as all accursed and unwelcome beings. But it's also possible that these two kept this secret from the Golden Order so that they could be accepted. I mean, I can't find much to back that other than the fact that they're extremely pale. The other D hangs out in the Eternal City, but not near any of the night folk or mimic tears, perhaps indicated that these two were shunned by the Nox. But of course, it's also possible he's not near them simply because by this point he finds them reviled and disgusting, because by this point he'd already been indoctrinated into the Golden Order's way of thinking, which basically viewed anything in the Eternal Cities as anti-Erdtree and should be exterminated, simply because it represents the past. The Greater Will and by extension the Golden Order aren't too fond of the past civilizations. Look how hard they wanted Liurnia pacified. They didn't like the sorcerers having all that autonomy. Anyway, all we really know about these two is that they never stood together, they never said a word to each other, and while they were of two minds and two bodies, they were of one singular soul. So that's all that we really factually know about them, and at some point, likely in their youth, they were discovered by Geraint, a dude who we already know to have taught the red and black death flame spells to vulgar militiamen in his service. So we already know that Geraint has no problem employing and even equipping and rewarding beings that would normally be shunned by the Golden Order and the Erdtree as a whole. With the vulgar militiamen, the short were said to be shunned in the Lands Between and basically held in little regard and seen as pariahs, so they had to kind of band together to survive. That's kind of another reason why I think one of the brothers D is a mimic tier of the other. Geraint would have no problem giving them purpose and crafting them into absolute killing machines. The fact that they were shunned by all the other institutions they came across made them the perfect candidates for Malekith to forge them into the most devout and fanatical tools he's probably ever had. I also like to think that their armor, the silver and gold, one of them being silver and the other one being gold, is a representation of the fact that one of them is a mimic tier of the other, but again, tenuous evidence at best. But these individuals grew up hated by basically everybody, and then one day they were found by a giant, somewhat kindly beast man. I like to think it was a similar scene to the one in Sekiro where Al found Wolf, but he found them, he trained them up, and you gotta remember, Geraint fully believes he deserves to be punished, and maybe he does, but they were taught by the literal guy who caused the outbreak of the Deathblight. So of course he's going to impress fanatical beliefs and an almost over-the-top hatred of the undead onto the two Ds. It's really no wonder he turned into the overzealous dude that he is. We also have to remember that for a time, D traveled with sorcerer Rajier, whose infatuation with the Deathblight ultimately got him infected to the surprise of absolutely no one. D is also implied to have seen several villages fall victim to the Deathblight or be destroyed by the undead, and I imagine all these events have done is further cement him into his belief system, and I mean it would for me too, I totally understand it. Look at the circumstances that led to D becoming Undead Hunter D. It all totally tracks. He's also not really doing anything wrong, he's just sort of killing the undead, putting them back to rest. He ain't hurting nobody, and then Fia goes and fucking murders him because he killed, hordes of skeletons or undead in his time, and probably would have tried to kill Godwin's corpse too if he found it. But we have to remember, she did kind of strike first even if she doesn't see it that way. It's not like D killed Lionel unless that's proven somewhere, but I don't think it is. All we know that D did was kill a bunch of skeletons and maybe some mariners. But that doesn't really jive with Fia's goals, does it? Now, Fia isn't really all that bad either. Life through death or power through death is definitely possible or was possible before the days of the Erdtree. We know that there was an afterlife that the worthy went to while the unworthy were turned into rancors. We know that the skulls of deceased ancestral spirits sprout new life, and also the bigger ones appear to be slumbering in a similar state to Godwin. You can even access a boss fight via their dreams in a similar manner. But much like the Omen and the Misbegotten, these are all things that the Golden Order and the Greater Will would rather forget and leave in the past. And when it came to the whole undeath thing, they pretty much had succeeded all until the death of Godwin, which basically changed everything by spreading a new plague of undead through the Lands Between, which I've probably said 9 times in this video. And I guess it's possible that the undead are causing havoc and destruction and spreading their plague all out of check because they have no leader. And that's what Fia's trying to do. She's trying to give them a new leader. In the end, her only way of doing this is birthing a mending rune and hoping that the player uses that to repair the Rune of Death, making the undead fit into the Golden Order again, effectively ending their quote-unquote persecution. I don't know, I just wanted to make this video because I've seen a lot of people say that he's like a fascist or something like that, and it's like, do you guys even know what that fucking word means anymore, or is that just bastardized like every other word nowadays? He's a fanatic, sure, especially the other D at the end, but think about it, his brother was killed, and not only was the person who did it like a champion of the undead who D hates, but she also would have done the same thing to this D that she did to the other D. Although it is kind of funny how she kind of died birthing the rune and he just stabbed her corpse a bit. If that's not what I'd call small victories, I don't know what is. And sure, he's spewing an insane Golden Order rhetoric, but what did you expect him to say, you know? The Golden Order was the only thing to accept him or his brother, so of course he's gonna throw himself wholeheartedly into the rhetoric. You gotta also factor in that while he was raised a certain way by Malekith/Geraint, he witnessed a great deal of real-world confirmation that his beliefs were true. For example, ruined villages destroyed by the undead, or for another example, his friendship with sorcerer Razier, whom he bonded with through their shared interest in exploring death. Of course, after Razier's infection, we see how D regards him, and I don't think it's wrong for D to think this way. I mean, for all intents and purposes, Razier's curiosity did get the better of him. He stuck his nose somewhere he knew he probably shouldn't have, and got himself cursed with some kind of root rot because of it. Of course, D sees this as a bit of an inevitability because of Razier's obsession with death, and I imagine all this did was further strengthen D's rather rigid belief system. You guys know I definitely don't like the Golden Order. I think that the Crucible sounded a lot cooler. But I think D, or rather the brothers D, make complete sense as characters. And I still think that the one hanging out down in the Eternal City is a mimic tier. I don't think I'll ever be able to prove it, but you can't really tell me otherwise, and you can't really prove otherwise either. Unless you can, of course, then oof to me. But yeah, that's really all I had to say on this subject. I know I got off topic a couple times, but that's the huge around here. But look, I definitely don't think being a Golden Order fanatic is cool. Although in the case of D, it makes complete sense why he fully bought into it. And what Fia did, while noble from her point of view, totally and completely opened her up to a rather understandable act of retaliation. Even if it was a little too late. Anyway though, as always, I hope you guys found the video enjoyable, at least somewhat entertaining, and if you liked it, please like it. If you disliked it, please dislike it, and if you like hearing me ramble on about random characters, random shit in general, please consider subscribing, it really helps me out. I don't know if I'll ever understand the YouTube algorithm, and let's hope I never need to. But without further ado, let's get to our outro and some final thoughts. Question of the day, how does everybody feel about Death Stranding? Because I do have a few video ideas. They're kind of far down the list, but I was just wondering if anybody, because I know it's a divisive game, I was just wondering what some other people's opinions were on it. As always though, I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one. Oh, also, there's a couple more final thoughts. Yesterday someone pointed out to me that the Rune of Death was technically already separate from the rest of the Elden Ring, long before the Night of Black Knives, and I had never really thought about that before, but I think they're right. I had always read it as Malekith sealed away the god-killing capabilities of the flame, basically extracted the Rune of Death out of it, and then kept it in his blade ever since he knocked off the Glowmite Queen. But I had always pictured this happening during the rise of the Erd Tree, like when Marika was still coming to power, and not necessarily after the establishment of her order, but now I think that, well, thanks to this comment, that it's highly likely, or at the very least somewhat possible, that Death was already technically bound, and that's why Randy needed her assassins to steal it in the first place. But it is said that they only stole a piece, and perhaps the piece they did steal was the god-killing piece. That's why when we knock off Malekith, that it only shows like regular peasants and stuff finally like able to die. Well, that and I guess the fact that there is no demigods left at that point. Unless you left Godric be like I often do. Sometimes I forget about the guy, but yeah, that's just something I wanted to say right before I ended this video. As always, you guys have a good one, and a big thank you to that commenter, Longcoat Gamer. I hope you don't consider that me doxing you or anything. That's just me trying to give you credit for your very, very insightful comment. So, as always, I will see you guys next time.
This is a proper death, oh prince. Look at this rotten whore. No more children can be got from this useless flesh. Behold, your mother is dead. This is revenge, you witch. And you ghoul. This is the wrath of D.